Welcome to a special episode of Connecting Business. I'm your host, Christina Munoz. You'll notice I'm not in my regular spot in the studio. That's because today we're taking a look back at a really great, though challenging year. Our Connecting Business guests brought their A-games to the show. There were some absolutely fantastic moments from the year that we'll highlight today. First up, independent retailers navigating a world turned upside down. You both have been building your business and you have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that you can share with all of us. But regardless of where anybody is in their own business or in life, so much came to a screeching halt in March of 2020. We've got this thing called COVID. We're now in a global pandemic. Now, you guys were already online, and I think that was probably a huge help for your businesses. But Chandra, I'm going to turn to you. What advice do you have out there as far as preparedness goes? We talk about emergency preparedness. Well, this was definitely unseen, unknown. No one knew it was coming. So moving forward, hopefully it's not a pandemic, but there's all these things we don't know about. What is your advice for us to plan and be ahead of the game in sorts for business owners?
Well, I think, I can speak to what I think benefited us, which is we did have a website, which we had built over the years. Our main source of revenue was our retail store. But I really felt like e-commerce was eventually going to be a much bigger player in our revenue. So we kept the website updated, we kept it going, we kept it fresh, we invested in it. So we were ready because we'd been doing the work. We had the website set up, we had the product selection, we had the social media following, we had the plans for what happens if our revenue dips this much or goes up this much, or we had all of these pieces in place. So when the pandemic hit, was basically ramping up this one portion of it and focusing and committing to that. And that's what saved us. And I mean, literally saved us, because we replaced all of our lost brick and mortar revenue with our website and then a little bit more. So it's just, sometimes I just feel so incredibly blessed. But then I also think, yes, but you were also ready. And you worked really hard and you committed. I think one thing that's really important is to not wish that things would go away. I didn't say, oh, well, it'll be better in a month and I'll just reopen the store. You have to face things with a clear eye, and you have to make the change and commit to it. That's what I did. And I think if I hadn't, we wouldn't have been as successful.
Well, that is some great advice. And you obviously have a great clientele base that supported you and kept you going. And so, Kelsey, kind of same question for you. How are you prepared? And what is your advice for anyone always trying to be prepared for the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think one big component of it is like preparing as much as you can, but also being nimble. And like, there's going to be stuff you just could have not prepared at all for. And I think, like Chandra said, staying really crisp enough on like the truth of what's happening, not trying to sugarcoat it and say it's going to get better, but look at like the current situation, take the emotion out, look at the numbers, and make decisions to keep moving forward in the best direction.
What great insight from two entrepreneurs who not only survived, but took their businesses to the next level during the pandemic. And it wasn't just retailers who had to adapt to this changing landscape. The hybrid workspace skyrocketed as no one was left untouched by COVID-19. Let's take a look at how employers and employees were impacted. Jordan, I want to switch over to you. And first of all, it's so cool that you work at LinkedIn, such a huge platform. I bet almost everybody on here has a LinkedIn profile. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of impact employees. And I'm curious to know what you have seen because, for example, my husband had two different jobs during the pandemic. And the first one, productivity went up when everybody went home. The second one, when he got there, he said, yeah, things didn't go well with everybody at home and we're bringing people back. So it's so interesting to me how different it can be. Well, what kind of trends have you seen with regard to the impact on the employees?
It's so true. Everyone has been impacted by this across the board. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter your work conditions. everyone had some kind of a struggle over the course of this last year. The one trend that I'm seeing amongst all workers, this is both frontline workers and more white collar workers, is burnout. Burnout and honestly, quite a bit of anger. People are feeling burned by their employers. They feel that they need a break and that the work-life balance needs to change more in their favor. So let's start with frontline workers. These are people who have been going into work. They can't work remotely. They have been putting themselves at risk and giving the rest of us food and services for pretty much the same wages that they've had for the last decade and very few benefits. And they are saying, look, enough is enough. If you want me to come in, you're going to have to pay me a lot more. And that is translating into all the hiring signs that we have seen. I mean, you drive up and down any commercial corridor and you are going to be bombarded with hiring signs, sign-on bonuses for McDonald's or other fast food places saying, hey, we'll give you a $2,000 signing bonus if you come and come work for us. And that's typically something that you've only seen before in larger corporations. And speaking of which, white collar workers are similarly burned out. As you mentioned, your husband with his one job, productivity went up. For most people who are working from home, they did not reclaim those commuting hours by finding new hobbies or spending more time with their pets. They worked more. And they're saying, hey, we've been working our tails off for the last year and we need a break. And more than that, there are many employers who are very eager for their workers to come back to the office. And workers are saying, well, hold up there, what do we want? And a recent LinkedIn Glint survey found that 55% of millennials do not want to go back to the office.
Wow.
And this is a really big generational divide. Baby boomers and Gen X are more eager to get back. Millennials and even Generation Z are more comfortable being remote. And that is a new demand that they have. And so employers are going to have to navigate that going forward. Part of this is leading to this idea that the press has deemed the Great Resignation, where you have a lot of people who took the last year to reevaluate what they're doing and think, is this what I want to be doing? Is this a company I want to be at? Is this a position I want to be in? What kind of value do I bring and what do I want to do? And for some, that is leading to a completely different outlook on life. They are switching industries, they're upskilling. But, I'm going to throw a little bit of water on this idea that we have this Great Resignation. Because the part that I think we are missing in all of this is we had a year and a half of people staying in their jobs. Normally, you do have some turnover in the year, but there is so much trepidation and uncertainty that people who maybe normally would have switched careers or moved on to a different company stayed put. They stayed with what they knew and what was safe. And now that things are opening up again, people are hiring more. Those workers who were already halfway out the door are now making that change.
Wow, such fascinating information, especially those statistics there. And the generational divide, I hadn't really thought about. Maybe it depends on where your employees fall generationally to determine whether or not it's good or bad with this new shift. So that was more employee perspective. Let's switch to the employer perspective. What is your advice? What can these employers do to navigate this shift of their employees?
I think the balance of power has shifted. And businesses are going to have to adapt to that. Employees now are holding way more of the cards than they have in the past. And they have certain demands. They want more flexibility. They want more benefits. They want higher wages. And they want way more communication and transparency from their companies. And so, I loved what Mary had said earlier about those weekly and daily meetings that the team was having and how they were going to communicate with employees, meeting them where they're at. All of that is so critical, and companies of all sizes are going to have to make that a regular part of their business going forward.
It's such great advice because it is hard and the expectations have changed. So Mary, I want to ask you to give us a little bit of past, present, future. What have you done? What are you doing? And as much as you can tell, what are your plans for the future when it comes to this moving back to office, maybe a little bit back to quote unquote normal for Windstream?
Yes, absolutely. Historically, we probably had 25% of our employees working from home. And so obviously made a huge shift just 18 months ago with the pandemic. Jobs that we would have never considered putting at home, we put there, and they did fantastic. And it was just a wonderful experiment in how effective working from home can be. As Jordan pointed out, employees like it, they value it, they like the flexibility, they can structure their lives and when they're going to work as they see fit.
It's amazing how resilient we all are, and it's important to look for the good that has come from all of this. And there's more good coming your way with our next look back. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not just about getting invited to the dance. Will you ask me to dance with you? Michael, I'm going to go back to you, and I want to really focus on these three words because they can kind of become these buzzwords, if you will. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. First, help us define them, and then really help us know the difference between these three words.
Absolutely. At first, I want to just talk about when a lot of people say, diversity and inclusion, the first thing they think about is race relations, right? And there's so much more than that. DE&I, you talk diversity, equity, inclusion. Let's start with diversity. It's just about making people unique in their own different ways, right? Different backgrounds, different personalities, different experiences, different beliefs. That's diversity. And when we talk about, equity, it's giving people what they need to succeed, right? Equity is promoting justice, is impartiality, it's just fairness, it's just equity. Inclusion, I like to look at inclusion like this, take it from an instance for going to a dance, right? Being invited to a dance, it is great, but if you're not invited to a dance, you're not really included. So I like to look at it that way when I talk about diversity and inclusion.
That's a very good analogy because you're talking to a ballet teacher here. Anything regarding dance, I'm all about. So it's about that invitation to the dance and really feeling included. Blake, go ahead and add some of your take on the definition of these words as well.
Well, it's really, so to your point, Michael, I do agree with you that everybody thinks about it as race related, but I think about diversity and I think about when you get married, some of the greatest issues that you have is family origin, where it's like, yes, well, we did it this way and you did it that way. I mean, so you begin to look at what's happening in a household and you're thinking about diverse point of view, right?
Yeah. Bring it all together.
Equity. And I think I have a child who has special needs and my child needs to be taught a special way. So it's not the same size fits all. And then inclusion, I think, is my favorite. And I had a hard time in choosing a college when I was much younger because I didn't want to be part of a Greek system because I didn't want somebody to tell me that I was good enough to belong or not good enough to belong. And I think that's feeling of, I want to feel like I'm accepted and that not only are you going to invite me to the dance, but you may ask me to dance. And as Michael knows, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to dance and I may sing the song. I may sing the song too. They just hand me the mic.
That's
but
right.
I just look at it and I think about it. This last year and a half has given us a lot to think about and really redefine things. And I hope that will help our communities grow, in understanding it more so.
Hand me the mic, Blake. I'll sing with you too. I have enjoyed so much revisiting these episodes from this year. Our last one today takes a close look at relationship building for Black entrepreneurs because relationships are at the core of everything we do. Fitz, you've talked about networking and the work your organization does to make sure that when Black business owners show up at lending institutions, they are prepared and can be more successful. So can you elaborate about the importance of networking and relationships when it comes to entrepreneurship?
It's no question. Relationships are at the core of anything. Being able to pick up a phone and call somebody that that can help you, walk you through the process. I can probably imagine with those statistics that you mentioned that was just normally you taking the application, you putting it in, nobody knows who you are. They don't know your face. They don't know anything. And they say, I don't know you. But the relationships that you build, it's just like in education. The number one predictor for academic success in the classroom is not test score, is relationship with the teacher. So it's the same way with the entrepreneur. If you have a relationship with a bank, or a bank, and you start building that relationship, because I believe you do business with people that do business with you. And that's why I think, you have to think about, why in many cases, when you look at the Asian population, and I saw this in California, which really opened my eyes, and I look at where the crime is the worst, is where the business operates the least. And so when you look at the Asian population, $1 stays in the Asian community 28 days. When you look at the Jewish population, it stays 16 days. When you look at the African American population, it only stays 6 hours today. 6 hours today. Prior to integration, $1 would stay in the African American community for 4 years. That's when you had Black Wall Street. You know why? Relationship connectivity. You had different ways, and so your money circulated within the community with your relationships. Now your relationship bankrupt when you have to leave your community to go outside and ask other people to support your community, and they don't live in it. And so it takes as much resource effort in building relationships outside of your community as within your community, because there are very few minority-owned banks. So the relationship component is critical for doing that, and that's why I applaud banks who have specific initiatives, that work specifically to target these populations, and not only just to say, hey, we've been affirmative, because that's not really the word. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure everybody is represented at the table. And we realize, when you start looking back at the businesses and things that have demised, I think one thing in Little Rock that I found out doing my research as a Scott Ford Center is that today there are only 4 or 5 African-American owned businesses that were open and operating prior to integration that still remain open today. And so when you start looking, you got to look at that. Why? Well, once integration took place, those businesses that were doing business in those relational communities, they went away. And so now when you want to look and say that neighborhood is bad, well, when segregation was there, those businesses had to develop out of the situation of the Jim Crow era that we were living in. So now, when these things happen, gifts come together to identify what Windstream is doing to help the underrepresented entrepreneur. I applaud that, because what you're saying, you're trying to level the playing field to some social disadvantages that most people may not be aware of. And banks have to make those loan exceptions, understanding and looking at the strategic end of it and say, well, if I can help this person, help this community, man, we may send fewer people to jail. We may save more money on. There's a lot of ways we have to look at what's a good loan. Not just the basic black and white paper. No, you don't qualify. Well, there may be reasons why. Could have been a divorce. It could have been a death. It could have been a lot of things. But Christine, if you don't have those relationships, you don't know.
And so I'm curious, in your opinion, is it more important for that individual in that community to get out and do relationships in those other places, or do we need those businesses making sure they're targeting those other communities, or both? I assume so.
And I'm saying, but here's the deal. The relationship representation is critical, that you have somebody who's from that area. And we do this. That's why you see now major corporations having vice president of diversity and inclusion. Why? To make sure that somebody's sitting around that table that's sensitive to make sure we are being inclusive of everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Connecting Business. Be sure to check out all our episodes at kineticbusiness.com/connectingbusiness and hit that subscribe button. If you have a guest or topic you'd like to see on the show, email us at connectingbusiness@windstream.com. Until next time, stay connected.